So, Bas, this is your office. How long have you been here?
Well, not all the time in this office. I've been in Princeton 26 years, but to begin, my office was where the lounge is now. That part was rebuilt. I had a fireplace and a big window seat like I have now, though, of course, it's a bit in the shoes at the moment. And I moved here, I suppose, perhaps about, 15, 16 years ago.
And are you more or less packed?
Yeah, well, as you can see, it's a bit of a mess at the moment, but all the crucial things to be given to the movers, I think, are out now.
So how does it feel, Bas?
How does it feel to be leaving?
Yeah.
I'm still so much midstream. It's, I don't really have a moment to reflect. I just have to do one thing after another. I think that it'll be a few months before I really will realize that I don't have this office anymore. I don't have Princeton. I don't have my house and garden. It'll be a very different situation. But before I came to Princeton, I was moving around all the time. I was often changing apartments or houses like every half year. So it's not something that I'm not used to.
And you said you had a restless soul, though.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, yes.
And have you been planning this move for a while?
Have I been doing what?
Have you been planning this move?
Oh, this
to leave
move.
Princeton for a while?
Well, yes and no. Originally I was going to stay half-time for another 2 years. But then last year, my wife Isabel got a job in San Francisco State starting this September. So, that's when we decided to move. I decided to set my retirement ahead to this summer.
And do you know what you're going to do in your retirement?
What I'm going to do, well, for a transition, I'll teach like one course a semester or something of that sort for 3 years. And apart from that, I don't really have any plans. I'll just see how things work out.
Is it common for people to retire this young, or?
This young? The standard age used to be 65.
Yeah.
And I'm 67 now.
Yeah.
So, the standard age was also, government mandated until, I don't know, maybe was it 10 years or so ago? And in many countries it still is, or it's only just changing now. So, my whole life I assumed I would be retiring at 65. And then they changed the law. So now, people have a choice about what they do.
But for you, is it associated with leaving philosophy or stopping doing philosophy?
No.
To the extent that...
No. Once you're an academic, it's a bit like steering the Queen Mary or some other big boat like that, because you can't make any changes very fast. So I already committed myself to giving lectures in 2008, 2009, 2010, in places like Italy and Sweden, and so it'll go on for a while.
So what will change?
What will change? I'll have a lot more free time. And well, for the last 6 years, I've been essentially half-time anyway, one way or another. Not all of it official, but always arranged somehow. And so it's during those 6 years that I used my free time to write this book, which is finished now. It should be coming out this fall.
What is it called?
It's Scientific Representation. And it's coming out with Oxford. It began as the lectures I gave in Oxford in 2002. Was it 2002, I think, or yes? The Locke lectures, and it's typical for these lectures to be published as a book, but in those 6 years, a lot of things changed. I mean, yes, it's based on the lectures, but I went in a different direction. interactions with it, of course. But now it's finished. I've just been proofreading galleys. So I suppose, in principle, I could use my free time after this to do something like that. But really, I want to wait a little while. You know, let's see how it goes.
So tell us something about academia and how academics use their time, and how you use your time. What's the structure of a day or a year?
Well, I don't know if all academics have the same kind of life. For the largest part of my academic life, I think I was traveling during the academic year about once a month. And sometimes that would feel a little, too much. I mean, there was a point when I was feeling a bit dispirited, and I said to somebody, now I think I was about 40 years old or something, like, I don't know, 25 years ago or so. I said, now I feel like a combination of a traveling salesman and an old age pensioner. Because I'd go away on these weekends and then I'd come back and sit in my office, yes, and then of course I had a lot of leave of absence. I took the absolute maximum of the sabbatical policies allowed and leaves allowed and so on. So I traveled sort of constantly, and I have to say that now I would think I would like to travel a bit less. In fact, for the last couple of years I had to travel a lot because my wife was working in Europe and I was here. But I've been thinking that maybe, well, I don't know if it's the typical life of an academic. It certainly was the typical life for me, and I enjoyed that a lot. I mean, it was something that I wanted to do, and it was a very welcome surprise to realize that as an academic, you could have that kind of life. And then, of course, as an academic, you have the summer months, well, I've spent it in many different ways, but to begin, when I was working in Canada or America, I would typically spend the whole summer in Europe. If I didn't have a sabbatical or something anyway, it was a way of just being away from my normal
So
life.
the lack of structure doesn't bother you, because it seems to bother many people who are grad students or in academia not to have the 9 to 5, the routine.
Yes. No, on the contrary, this is just what I love about it. Yeah, I really like that. It's what is true is that sometimes you become a bit too involved. I mean, the fact that you don't have to be here 40 hours a week often means that you spend something like 60 hours a week working, see, or more. But for me, it has sort of gone, I would say, up and down. Sometimes for a while I would be doing that. For a while I would be a real workaholic, and then other times I would really take advantage of the fact that we had all this flexibility, and we can postpone some work to other times and so on. So, to my I mean, I had no idea of academic life when I was young. I didn't come from a family or an environment where anybody was an academic. What I saw in college I couldn't see that it was very different from what, say, somebody who works in a bank does and so on, to begin at least, right? But then I had some very interesting teachers who clearly showed that, there was lots of leeway, not all of them were the same. So when I went into philosophy and wanted to become an academic, I didn't at that point know what it would be like. I didn't. So a lot of it was, a really nice surprise for me.
So who were these teachers, and what was it about their lives then?
So as an undergraduate, I was at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And I would say that the chairman of the department was a very traditional sort of philosophy figure, right? But then my favorite teacher, the one who taught me the most, was a logician, Karl Lambert. And he was very athletic and very easy. had, a very, what should I say, very easygoing personality, that, things were easy for him, right? And the kind of, I would say that in the classes and also in like some directed reading courses he gave me and so on, was more like, friendly fellowship. And so in fact I continued with him. When I went to graduate school, he moved, I went to graduate school in Pittsburgh, and he moved to West Virginia University, which is very close. And so we started working together, and we wrote papers together over the next, during the next decade, actually. And then, he was not the only one. Other than that, in my undergraduate department, there was an Englishman who was quite radical Marxist. There was a Canadian who had been studying in England and was a real Anglophile, and his philosophy for him was Kant and Hegel and British idealism. And then we had a Norwegian existentialist, Herman Tennyson, who was who became a very well-known figure around there. He was always on television, debating things with people. A very physical sort of man who claimed that he was the arm wrestling champion of the province. And so, yes, I hadn't been a student very long before I realized that there were all kinds of academics, right? At the same time, I mean, I'm giving you the more lively figures at the moment, but another great experience I had right in the beginning was the professor who was teaching English literature. He was a very cultured man and very scholarly, not old, and he picked out the people in the class that he thought were promising intellectuals, so to speak. And he formed a little group, and we would come to his house in the evening, and his wife would be there too. She would join in, and we would discuss novels, and it was and that was a very different scene. You see, I would, that showed me another side of academia, which I also appreciated very much. And so for a while I thought, I would maybe, at least for my minor, I should be in literary studies, literature. So I took literary criticism and things of that sort. But in philosophy, I was really drawn to philosophy of science, and so I was taking math and physics instead of literature after a while. But I never lost love for that, and I think it was that first teacher, that really put me on the road there.
But was this, you've presented a lot of the easygoing aspects of, has that been in your experience typical, or?
Yeah.
Basically, one gets a sense of lots of people who are actually very stressed out and working very hard all the time. Or,
yeah, why do they do that?
Yeah,
why do that? There's times when I work very hard too, but, you do that when you need to. It's not life, eh? I often see people becoming very anxious, and they have the pressure from outside, right? And this has never been my experience as far as, as a student, as a graduate student, as a young faculty member. I never felt that I was laboring under external pressure. Things were exciting. And it was exciting what I was doing. So I would have done it even if, if I had to take another job and pay to do it. I don't know. That's probably exaggerating, but...
Why is that? Is that something about your personality, or is it the times have changed and people in those days were more laid back?
In those days, there were also people who were depressed or pressured or tense. Yeah. Okay, certainly there were, and to some people, things come more easily than to others, I suppose. You know, but I was lucky enough to be in the company of people whose attitude toward life was so much more easygoing. See?
And it was still academics and success in academics.
Yes, yes. I mean, successful enough. I mean, that's you know, and I don't know. I can you know when I certainly, of course, I have experienced outside pressures, but it's never been that, right? It's been more things like immigration, you know, things like having to do with getting a house, losing a house, or selling a house, or family difficulties, or you know, all these sort of things that appear in everybody's life.
But they're not the academics.
No,
right?
no, I have not found that at all. No.
And have you had students who've come to you and sort of worried about, you know, whether they should drop out of grad school or, you know?
Yes, of course.
What do you say to them?
Well, I realize that everybody is different. I mean, some people, in some cases, I know what I have told them when I really didn't know, you know, when I could really see that they were in some sort of, you know, difficulty about their decisions. I would ask myself, not should I tell this person to, you know, become a philosopher, but rather, does this person have the talent to become a philosopher? And if so, I would say, look, I want to tell you, you do have the talent to become a philosopher, but I want to also tell you that academic life is not for everyone. There is, you know, unless the kind of things that you have to do to be an academic are things that fall easily with you, it could be very hard. I mean,
when you say it's not for everyone, what are the sorts of people for whom it's clear that academic life, you know, it's not for them?
Well, it has to do with the same thing. If you subjectively feel the pressure of competition with other students or with other faculty, or feel that what has to be done in order to, you know, meet the criteria is a burden on you, then I think it becomes very hard, you see. And I don't know to what extent these things are objective and to what extent subjective. I really don't know. But I can imagine two kinds of people who would be unhappy as academics. One are people who feel that the kind of constraint we have is even too much for them. And artists, for example. Right? An artist typically doesn't want to live the way we do. And the other extreme is the kind of person who doesn't find it easy to let go of the pressure. So, I mean, if you want to travel, right, you know very well that while you're traveling, you're not going to be finishing a paper that you're writing. Right? And if you have the sense that the competition or the pressure for, you know, preparing for your tenure or something like that is something that you can't let go of, then you might as well not travel, because it's not going to be a going away from, you know, where you are, really. It's all going to be inside your mind and pressing on you. So I think these two kinds of people, two extremes, you know, couldn't live very well with this. And then also, of course, I suppose there are other cases, like, you know, people who just feel that they want to have, they want to get more money. I mean, after you have tenure, you have security. At a place like Princeton, you can earn quite a lot of money. Many places you don't earn so much. And then the other thing is, of course, security. Well, everybody who starts out today is very worried about tenure. Now, in my days, it wasn't true. Yeah, it wasn't, because I came in at a time that, tenure wasn't such a problem. But there isn't any other industry, where you have more security than that. Okay, so it's not as if, what's the alternative?
So are there any parts of the academic life which you dislike or like less than others?
Dinner parties. Dinner parties I don't like. There's a certain kind of social life that is often very present on a campus that I don't care for.
So this is things that you're expected to.
Well, you're not obliged at all, and there's lots of exceptions. I mean, like, some of the nicest experiences in just the past year have been going to people for what you might call dinner parties. But what I'm talking about is something else, which I haven't encountered now for quite a long time. But I remember I really disliked it when it was there, and that is when there was a kind of custom in the department where I was at the time, for the faculty members to invite each other and their families in a kind of round robin kind of way. You see, oh, that's awful. And, a long time ago, I talked with Stuart Hampshire. It's a very long time ago, and he had taught here. He had been other places in America, and he had been in Oxford. And he told me at the time, he said, "You know what I really dislike? It's the ADPs." I said, "What are ADPs?" He said, "Awful dinner parties."
And is that because you don't like socializing with other academics? Or?
Oh, no, sure. I like socializing with other academics, At the moment, we're very fortunate to have a very sociable chairman, who, his house is a wonderful place to go, and he has people come, and it's free, and it's easy, and there are sheep, and I believe there's going to be a llama pretty soon, okay? And many birds, so something like that is wonderful, and socializing with academics is fine, but if you ask me what I remember disliking, I have to say that there was a certain period when it seemed to me that I was always being invited to these ADPs. But that's a long time ago. So what else don't I like about academic life? I don't like grading. Grading I find disturbing.
Why disturbing?
Well, I know pretty well what the students, I know pretty well, I know what I mean by, this student is better than that, or has done better work than that, and so on. But what gets in the way for me is trying to disentangle the evaluation of the effort from the achievement. Because it seems to me that when somebody makes a real effort, there should be credit for that. But in fact, it's not true. In fact, when an undergraduate applies to graduate school, and the graduate school looks to see whether they want to admit that person, what they want to know is not the effort, they want to know the achievement. So they want to have grades that tell you, and not just graduate school, but like a law firm or industry. When they look at the grades, they don't want to know how hard or conscientiously this person worked. They want to know how well they did, right? And I always have a conflict with this. I find it hard to disentangle the two. To not, let the grade reflect something about how the person went about it.
But this is specific to undergraduates. It wouldn't apply to writing unit reports. So.
No, writing a unit report, no. Writing a unit report, yeah, but most graduate schools are not like ours, or most graduate philosophy departments are not like ours. Yes, we have a good system. Writing the unit report, you can really, talk about the work and say what you think and react to it and so on. and you don't have to give a grade, which like feels very artificial. So.
But you enjoy teaching?
Teaching I always liked. Yeah, it takes up a lot of time. That's that's the drawback, of course. But
do you end up teaching on stuff that you're currently working on, or do you use teaching
sometimes,
yeah.
when you give a seminar, right? Some courses I find very difficult. Introduction to our 2 or 3 introduction to epistemology and metaphysics, I liked a lot. I did it my own way, very historically, just taking texts from Plato and Aristotle and Descartes and so on. And I really liked that. I liked to be teaching that course. But Introduction to Philosophy of Science, I think, is a disaster. It's a disaster. There's no good text for it. There is nothing that I have figured out by way of doing it historically that works very well.
So how do you teach it?
Oh, I've tried everything. I've tried every variation. I've tried doing it sort of historically. I was just talking with Tim Maudlin yesterday, and there were a couple of his students there, and they had taken his philosophy of science course, and he had taught it historically. The logical positivists, the end of logical positivism, Kuhn, but also scientific realism, So it was like the history of the 20th century. Yes, I've tried to do it that way. I've also tried to do it by topics, induction, explanation, laws, theories. Okay. I've tried to do it by text, like Hempel's little text and other things that come out. And each time I've been very dissatisfied with it. It should be the easiest for me.
Right.
But it's the hardest to figure out what would be a really good introductory course there. Can we pause for a moment?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that this is a good place to pause.
Okay.
Bas, I want to return to this question about what might be dispiriting about an academic life and what sorts of pressures might be involved. And in particular in the context of, say, analytic philosophy, there's this thought or claim that people have that as a field it's something that sort of is extremely aggressive, or and that this department, at least at one point, exemplified that way of doing philosophy.
Yeah.
So, you're somebody who's also has had experience in different fields, I guess, partly through the work you do. What do you think of that? Do you think there's something especially competitive or aggressive about analytic philosophy?
There's something quite aggressive about many people who do analytic philosophy, that's right. I don't know how a social phenomenon like that starts. Bertrand Russell was quite aggressive. Analytic philosophy, half of it started in Britain, and Britain academic style is very aggressive. They like to show each other up in some ways. So that may, have set the tone there, right? On the other hand, the logical positivists who came to America, I don't know about all of them, but Carnap and Hempel, everybody referring to them always says what gentle souls they were. And in the case of Hempel, I know that personally. And people in this department who knew Hempel will tell you he's just the kindest man in the world. I mean, no matter how stupid the question you asked, he would find some way to make it look good. Wesley Salmon, who I think of in the same breath with some of these people, and who was a student of Reichenbach, same thing, same gentleness. I can't say the same of myself. I feel that very often in debate I become quite aggressive. I hope with students, but with colleagues in conferences and so on, I think it is certainly part of our way of doing things that we give the strongest criticism we can. At the same time, we only feel appreciated if people are willing to take the time to criticize us. Mutual criticism is the form of discourse among analytic philosophers. It's true that this is quite peculiar to analytic philosophy. Yeah, my experience in Europe is that people can be critical, but it is not. It's definitely not in the same way. Now, is that hard to take? Well, it can be, of course. If you're on the receiving end, you could, and if you feel that you are, that you don't have an answer, well, yes.
And do you think there's an important connection between, the sorts of values that one kind of analytic philosopher might exemplify, the sort of the quickness of response, the cutting counterexample, and sort of philosophical talent, or do you think it's... Have you come across people who, might do quite badly on the sort of the cut and thrust of debate, but who you still think of as good philosophers?
Oh yes, yes. And it is definitely not the style of continental philosophy. And I've always been very. There's a good deal of analytic philosophy that I love, and that is part of my background, and that is part of what I turn to. I have always been astonished at the kind of parochial distaste that I sometimes see when analytic philosophers look at European continental philosophy. So the fact that somebody who is trained in continental philosophy doesn't have this cut and thrust, as you say, doesn't for a moment mean that what they're doing is not good or insightful. On the other hand, the cut and thrust, quite the opposite. I think it can make you very superficial if you just stick with that game. And I think that a lot of analytic philosophy has become very superficial and very scholastic. A lot of it now reminds me of the late Middle Ages, when logic and philosophy of language, in a very what we now literally call scholastic manner, was dominant in philosophy. So that's too bad. That's too bad.
But you see this as a change. It's become like this. It wasn't always like this.
I don't think so.
In the course of your career.
No. I think that I have seen it become more and more scholastic since I began. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's unfortunate. Yeah.
So there's the scholastic dimension, but there's also the aggressiveness dimension. So how do you see these things?
Are they connected? Well, I suppose that if you're out for a quick win, then you have to make little logical points. If it's a matter of scoring points, well, yes. Well, you're leading me into this. You're asking leading questions, and I'm beginning to. And I'm saying yes. I think that probably you're right. There must be a connection between the two. But it's also. I don't know. You see, I think of analytic philosophy as a very, very good development in the history of philosophy. But every good development can be subverted by taking it to some extreme. There have been times here in the department when students would tell me that they were finding that among the students it was getting too aggressive. And what can be done about something like that? I don't know. People come with personalities already formed when they come. to say about this?
Let's not stick on this for very long, but maybe say something about how you feel. So within analytic philosophy, are things done differently in different departments? Where do you think Princeton fits into that scheme of things? How you think it may have changed since the time you got here, in terms of the sort of philosophical atmosphere that a student or faculty member would encounter?
We used to go to each other's seminars more often, and that could sometimes have a damping effect because the faculty and maybe visiting fellows and so on can take over the discussion, and then the students don't get to speak as much. But on the whole, I haven't seen that it was such a problem in the seminars that I've been in myself. I always used to go to Dick Jeffrey's seminar, and Dick would like to joke, but he would never put somebody down, right? And the same with David. David's greatest pleasure was to hear an objection. If somebody would raise an objection to something of his, you would see this big smile coming on his face, you see. All right, and then there would be a little pause, and then he would answer in complete paragraphs. I mean, it was amazing to behold.
What about receptions of speakers from outside coming to give talks?
Yes, in the discussion after the people's talks, it's pretty sharp. Yes. Well, I mean, it doesn't seem to me that this is bad. I suppose it depends. I mean, if the person in question is easily hurt, then you shouldn't do it, right? So you should try to see that, but it is mutual criticism is the form of our discourse. There's no question about it, and we're supposed to learn from it. You're supposed to, if you get a very good question, a very good objection, and you don't have the answer, you're supposed to say, I don't have the answer, and you're supposed to go home and think about it and work on it. And if you never get these things, how do you get any further, right? So, I don't think it's bad. It can be done in a bad way. You can do this you can do this courteously or discourteously. And you can be nasty or condescending, or you can, make it a matter of friendly rivalry. It's not bad itself, though I can see that there are bad ways to do it.
Okay, well let's switch tacks a little bit. I'm curious about how would you describe, and maybe this is a more general question, say your creative process. So I guess for you said this project, the one you just finished, it's taken about 6 years, and it sounded like the scientific image was also something that took 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Just how do you work how do you come to a problem, or is there can you see a pattern in the way you work as a philosopher, both maybe at a micro level in terms of when you're working, what do you do when you wake up in the morning, or in the course of a project, how things seem to develop? Is there a rhythm?
Yeah, there is. I tend to have an idea for the whole project, okay? But I divide up the work for myself into parts, and often I find myself subdividing and subdividing. And the parts I like to present in seminars or when I give talks somewhere, so that I can have some interaction about them. And then, I usually make up different versions, one after the other. to get feedback on, have discussion about. And then I put the parts back together again.
So that's been the way all these projects are.
Yeah, that's the way that's the way the books that I've written have all been, have come about, yes.
And I think that you've known from the beginning what the broader project is, and you've known how to divide it up.
Yeah, in outline, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you change in various ways, but the basic idea of the project is there from the beginning. Yeah. Yes.
And you usually have a good sense of how long it will take you to.
I always think I can do it in 2 years, and it doesn't take. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.